I'm just gonna come out and say it. This is a good show. I have no idea why or how, but a show about Hitmonkey of all things is one of the better American adult animated shows that's come out in years. It's no Invincible, but I think it's worthy enough to be included in conversations about Invincible, and it certainly leaps and bounds ahead of Hulu's other failed train wreck of an animated show, MODOK Chicken, and yet, just like MODOK, not a single damn soul is talking about it online. I think we ought to change that. Take a look at this eccentric series with me and let me tell you why I think Hitmonkey is worth watching, and definitely worth getting another season. Before we see how this extremely obscure character managed to somehow have a heartfelt, intriguing, and sincere action comedy show before Deadpool, let's take it back to Hitmonkey's roots as a Marvel comic to see what on earth made that character even remotely worth adapting. I used to think you shouldn't try to adapt a character unless they've had a solo comic for at least 20 issues. This made me rethink that. I got into Deadpool with the Daniel Way run, which is controversial, and I remember not being a fan of the backdoor pilot issue where Spider-Man and Deadpool fight an assassin monkey in a suit. Something about it just felt lame and gimmicky to me, like the joke just wore thin instantly. Yes, it's a monkey in a little suit and tie, and he shoots people. It's hilarious. Then I never really gave it much thought after that. I knew that he had his own comics, but I just never really felt the need to pursue them. Then I saw the trailer for this show while paying, half attention to it because I was, busy doing something else, I think. And that paints it as this fast-paced, joke-filled action schlockfest with Jason Sudeikis playing the wisecracking human character, and what I saw of the trailer just manifested as this really loud, terrible, obnoxious version of the show in my head. I was picturing yet another animated comic book show trying and failing to be like Harley Quinn, which I would have probably hated. And hating things makes for more provocative video titles, so I thought I'd check it out. I got a business to run here, kids. Leave me alone. Check out my second channel. I post videos on the second channel. Did you know there's a second channel? Well, at first, I did my due diligence and read all of the Hitmonkey solo comics. There's not a lot of them. I was expecting Daniel Way's worst, but was shocked to find out that it's some of his best. Instead of just being a cringy joke fest, it's a story about the guilt of being a killer, the lonely and endless path of revenge, and losing oneself to violence. But, it's also about a monkey shooting people, too. The story starts with an assassin on death's door after a double cross. He wanders out into the forests of Japan and lays down in the woods to die. He awakens to find himself being taken in by peaceful animals that nurse him back to health with healing herbs in a hot spring. One of the tribe of monkeys is aware of the kind of guy he is and wants the assassin gone. In trying to spy on him, he ends up learning from the nameless hired killer and is imparted some wisdom by the one he hates. Soon after, the assassin's pursuers catch up to him and shoot him dead, as well as the entire tribe, leaving only one left. The lone monkey picks up the assassin's now ownerless weapon and begins a path of revenge, killing everyone that took part in the massacre of his people. At this point, I was kinda digging it, but I was unsure how you can have a story about an animal that can't speak running around doing things that are pretty out of his scope, like tracking down names and addresses and distinguishing who to kill, or operating firearms. But it's revealed that the reason he's so above average intelligence for his species is because the spirit of the assassin now lives in his mind. The dead assassin is still the main character, in a way, and the monkey is more of a vessel for him to take his revenge from beyond the grave. By guiding him around and helping him know things that he shouldn't be able to as just a normal animal. As a huge fan of the Child's Play movies, this caught my interest. I thought a monkey assassin in a suit shooting people was too stupid. But then you add in the factor of him being partially possessed by the spirit of a dead human assassin, and that pushes it so far over the edge of stupid that it loops back around, and now I can actually take it seriously again. I figured this was the first thing the show would cut or change, and they'd have the assassin just be alive throughout the whole story and be a silly, annoying dick through the whole thing, so the audience has had at least one kind of normal-ish thing to attach to, because admittedly, a buddy adventure between a ghost and a monkey is a hard one to accept, even though conceptually it's fucking awesome. And in spite of this weirdness, it ends up being kind of a dour and sad book. Like, yeah, the premise is silly, but the execution still lingers on all of these heavy themes, and the violence is played so straight. It's never reveling in being badass to the extreme! Eventually, the monkey kills everyone that he wanted revenge on, but witnesses super assassin Bullseye kill an innocent child, and that just leads him to wanting even more revenge against Bullseye and whoever else he comes across that's a hired killer. It's this vicious cycle of never finding peace on this path and being trapped, killing and killing forever with no end in sight. He's like the Punisher, but a monkey, and targeting assassins globally instead of just organized crime stateside. And as I was reading this, I just kept remembering the loud, obnoxious trailer for the show and how the human assassin was a wisecracking goofball and the action was so silly, and I couldn't picture any of these moments happening in the show. The assassin's saying about picking up a weapon in anger, the assassin dying in the snow and his vengeful spirit forcing this innocent creature down a path of destruction that never ends. These were the moments that changed my mind about the character being dumb and worthless. And I didn't think the Hulu series would have the sense to recreate any of that, because, admittedly, I've become very jaded toward Hollywood adaptations of comics, especially animated ones after MODOK, so yeah. Hulu released a boring, heartless, trashy animated show about a dumb, unlikable animal with no charisma. And they also released Hitmonkey, hey-o! But then I watched the show, and the assassin, now named Bryce, isn't really meant to be the ha-ha funny character. He's wisecracking and doesn't take anything seriously, but it's just a shield to hide that he's this bitter, broken man that struggles with the guilt of who he is and what he's done.
Killing is not easy. It's not just point, shoot, and watch the bad guy go bye-bye. It's watch you go bye-bye. Because every time you kill someone, a little bit of you dies too.
Right in the first episode, he pulls off this assassination, and then there's this long, quiet sequence of him just lamenting his crime. No jokes, no punctuating the scene with a Joss Whedon-style wisecrack, well, that just happened. Just this quiet, reflective moment of sadness. Bryce's character actually reminds me a lot of how Daniel Way wrote Deadpool on his better days. He's wisecracking and being silly, but he's not really played for comedy. The tone of the overall story is still relatively serious. He's just one character using humor to cope with being a monster. He's the only real comic relief in a show that's otherwise played very earnestly despite the weirdness of its premise, and I respect the hell out of that. And in the first episode alone, they faithfully bring all these moments that I like from the book to life, almost scene for scene, just with a little more context and giving Bryce more of a personality.
I wouldn't do that if I were you. You pick up one of these in anger, and you'll never put it down.
That right there is what just won me over. And look at that, the whole show is about him being a ghost in the monkey's head. I guess I just didn't notice that part in the trailer somehow? My eyes are busted. I'm a stupid zoomer who's always looking at his phone and pays 20% attention to everything but 100% to nothing. So anyway, they actually made me care about this NFT reject. Hulu's Hitmonkey is full of hard-hitting moments that don't always try to make you laugh. They try to attach you to the plight of these characters. The protagonists are damaged people who are struggling to find their place in a violent and strange world. And along the way, they do manage to have some fun, and they do it with some style. Monkey and Bryce's dynamic is more fleshed out in the series, and they're both fully formed characters that play off each other well, despite the fact that one of them can't interact with the world around him, and the other can't speak to anyone except Bryce and other animals. I really like this story, and all of the additions that the comic didn't have are welcomed and fit well. We actually get to see the assassination that Bryce did to ignite the story and cause his own death, and it creates this mystery plot to figure out who is the real criminal that hired him. He kills a politician that's running to become the Prime Minister of Japan, and it throws the lives of everyone around that candidate into chaos. But it also causes corruption and crime to spike because that candidate was the only thing left standing in their way from total control. Now Bryce's spirit and his animal companion have to kill their way up the underworld's chain of command to find out who is behind it all and stop the corruption from completely tearing apart Tokyo. This expansion of the story allows for a lot more interesting stuff with the new original human characters, like Akiko, the idealistic young speechwriter for her uncle Shinji, who tried to run for office after their friend and running mate was killed for standing up to the criminals and corporations. Hitmonkey's trail of revenge also attracts the attention of Ito and Haruka, two Japanese police officers. One's a veteran and the other's a rookie, so they both approach all of this chaos with very different mentalities and techniques. All of these additions to the cast really give the story more meat, and fill the running time with more substance than just if they adapted the 4 issues panel to panel. I think this version of the story may ultimately be better for that choice to add these extra characters. The series is, of course, also set in some variation of the Marvel Universe, so naturally there's some cameos and references here and there to that world, that thankfully aren't intrusive or forced. The show still feels very much self-contained and unreliant on these references, and they're only there to service what the show is trying to accomplish on its own. Really, they only reach out to Marvel content that feels tonally appropriate to mingle with the show, so no cringy mention of the Avengers or MCU favorites are thrown in. Being set in the Marvel Universe also allows for a few cool original characters that casually have superpowers because that's just how it is to be in the Marvel Universe. A ton of people get superpowers from one thing or another. You can get powers from being bit by a radioactive jackrabbit in this world. That happened once. Meaning, Monkey can have some interesting battles here and there with characters that have their own unique gimmicks, costumes, and powers to break up the usual armed Yakuza gun battles. Oh dear Jesus, oh god no, there's a MODOK reference! I thought the crossover was scrapped! Please don't taint this with that unfunny big-headed tool! I love the political crime drama thing this show is going for in between all the anti-hero action-y elements. It's really well written, and having this series set exclusively in Japan was an interesting choice. Pretty much every Marvel story is set in the United States, more specifically New York City, so seeing a part of the world outside of that was a fresh idea that helped this stand out. They also have a nearly all Asian voice cast outside of Jason Sudeikis, and that helps the setting feel more authentic, and really allows for some VAs I haven't heard before to shine in bigger roles here. This was a story I wasn't expecting to be so fascinated by, but I loved every second of it, and I want to see what happens next. And damn it if this show doesn't actually have some really cool visuals to drive the story home. I truly love the look of this show. No monkey business here. Yes, the animation is obviously very budgeted. It's closer to something like Archer than Harley Quinn or Invincible, but I think the show's art design and direction work overtime to distract from that. These backgrounds are gorgeously rendered. The camera work and cinematography is surprisingly dynamic and full of life that really amps up the excitement or the melancholy when necessary. And the animation spikes up into being pretty smooth just when it needs to be. They really did the absolute best with the limitations they had to work with, and as such, I think the show's visual style ends up being really unique and cool. I didn't feel like it looked stiff or boring, when it easily could have with this basic tweening art style. Even the fight scenes managed to be pretty kinetic and powerful, though the animation quality sometimes lacks in other places when you could tell they were saving up for the really important scenes.
You sick?
It's the monkey!
Sometimes cutting a corner is clever instead of lazy, because it lets the animators focus their time and attention on the really good stuff.
Don't you worry, sir. You can always trust me.
Hitmonkey is a well-crafted show that could have easily just been some obnoxious cash grab pulling from whatever random Marvel IP hasn't been adapted yet to further milk the current hype for Marvel stuff. But it's not that somehow. I feel like people who worked on this show were all putting in their A-game for a project that no one is talking about or excited for. So I want to personally say, hey, I noticed. I appreciated the shit out of all that effort. I love the show, and I would absolutely watch more of it. If you got a subscription to Hulu, go take a gander and tell me if I'm totally crazy, or if this show is way better than it had any right to be.